Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 628, Subtly Sexist. For Monday, March 15th, 2021. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norton. Thanks for joining us. Sexism. The marketing world has taken a stance against it and promised better portrayals of women in ads. But what's the reality? Some progress for sure, but in many ways it's more subtle now, and worse than ever. How should we address it? Tonight we'll discuss. Also, the numbers on T-commerce. Unilever bans the word normal in their marketing. Twitter's plan for a Spaces tip jar. Plus this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the managing partner for the marketing practice at CI Squared and co-host of Across the Pond Marketing Transformed, Mr. Samuel Mani. Hi, Sam.
Hey, Bob. Thanks for having me. It's an honor and a privilege, and I'm excited to be here this week.
It's always an honor and a privilege to have you on the program, so that's fantastic. Now, also with us, we have the Director of Marketing Communications at Cuisinart, Ms. Mary Rogers is back. Hi, Mary.
Hi, nice to be here again tonight. You're breaking up my evening on Sunday from my usual cooking adventures.
That's pretty apt for a person who works at Cuisinart to be into cooking, so that's fantastic. Now, next, he's one of the good ones, and we're excited to have him on the show. Former Ogilvy Executive Creative Director and now founder of the independent agency George & Co., or George Co., Mr. George Tannenbaum. Sorry I screwed that up, George, but welcome to the program.
That's okay. My name is actually Paul, so the whole thing's screwed up. No, thanks for having me, Bob. I think we've been threatening to get together for about 5 years.
For a long time.
It's nice that we finally are.
Yeah, really, really glad to have you on the program. And
likewise.
And finally, he's a partner and co-lead of the global marketing and sales practice at Profit, as well as author of the new memoir, Bronze Seeks Silver, Mr. Matt Zucker. Hey, Matt, how are you?
Hey, Bob, thanks for having me back on. It's always great to be on your show. It forces me to read the news.
I have that effect on people. Well, let's jump right into the topics right off the bat. The results of a new book called Brandsplaining suggests that while great strides have been made to end sexism in the advertising industry, the results seem to be that our efforts have only pushed ads to be more subtly sexist, if that's a phrase. And they claim that sexism is back on the rise overall. Now, Mary, we always take studies like this with a grain of salt on this show because you never can trust what the subtext is of a study without really digging into it. But do you find the claims of this particular study as compelling as I do? Because I'm reading through this, and there's some pretty spectacular, kind of scary statistics that show that sexism is alive and well in advertising, isn't there?
Yes, from what I've been reading, I believe it's true. I think, it comes from a couple of different things. I think one of the things is like lack of representation in the actual advertising world. I think some of the things that are portrayed, for women is maybe not litmus testing it, in my opinion. I think some of the things that are going on, like you mentioned, that, there's been a big swing with maybe making it more subtle. But I also think that there could be a lot of contribution from the media, from celebrities, from social media, that I think that a lot of advertising feels like they have to break through. And so oftentimes maybe are over exuberant when it comes to portraying women in general. These are all.
Yeah, I agree with you, and to a certain extent. I mean, there is an overexuberance that leads to a certain amount of sexism, and certainly representation is part of the issue. But there seems to have been a large movement within the industry to equalize things, yet it doesn't seem to have equalized things in terms of the boardroom, in terms of the leadership at agencies. I mean, we're still talking about, what is it, the 3% conference talks about there's only 3% of creative leadership is women. Is that not still the case?
I believe it is. I think, I think part of it is like, if you show some of these ads to women and they were honest, they would tell you that they find them to possibly be offensive. I think what happens in the advertising world, and not just in the case of women, but in general, is that when brands are called out on things that they may have done that can be considered offensive or not, good representation of diversity, you then see all the ads swing in that direction. And, then it becomes like almost overdone in a way.
It's pretty disappointing to see these stats too, because you would think that, I hear so much more conversation about, should the voiceover be male or female, or should the character of the family caring person be a woman, or let's make it the guy? Should the philandering, bumbling idiot, does it always be the husband? So you'd think there'd be more progress when there's more discussion, you'd think, going on about it. But some of the other stats too is about, like what you said, the presence. There's still women are appearing still at a lower rate than men in advertising. We see it in the tent poles. You see more visibility. But if you look at the stats of like day-to-day advertising, it's still like below like a third or something like that, which is really shocking.
Yeah,
I'm going to be a pain in the ass and say I think the problem transcends sexism. I think we have, I guess you could call it empathyism, grinism, stupidism. We have an abundance, a lack of empathyism. I mean, the dearth of realism in advertising. Like, gee whiz, I'm going to talk about my phone network all night with my buds, and I'm going to high five in my living room. I don't really think that happens. And as for digital media, go online and look at a business to business ad and see how many people are staring at their screen and smiling. I've never done that, and I'm on my screen all day. So, I think the industry's lack of truth is really what is insert curse word here, up the industry. I think that's really why the industry or the public seems estranged from the industry. I don't think most people leave Williamsburg. I don't think they ever get to know a consumer. I don't think they ever get to really. I bet you 85% of the people who are writing car ads don't even have driver's licenses. So I think it goes. I think it's a realism, it's an empathy, it's an understandingism that plagues the industry.
I don't know that
sexism doesn't.
I don't know if that's necessarily true. I mean, when we're talking about young people in the industry, I would think that young people would be more, how should we say, woke about these issues. I mean, they tend to be. I mean, the younger people in the industry are leading it forward. It's the older people who are, kind of the problem. I mean, the leadership of the agencies are where the bottlenecks are.
You hit the nail on the head, because they who has the power? And so I'm channeling the 2019 ad week when at the end of this week, where there was a huge focus on women and inclusion, they had Pitbull with the scantily clad women gyrating on stage when they were trying to, which came across as tone deaf. And so if you're running a flagship industry event and you completely miss the mark, that kind of sets that you're out of touch with culture, but also the people who are making the decisions aren't necessarily the people who should be making the decisions or should be making the decisions going forward. So when George talks about lack of isms and empathy and realism, that's absolutely so true. And as I'm thinking about this topic, I remember I taught an ad class a few years ago, and I was advertising class, and I was just pulling the Super Bowl ads, and I've seen the evolution in the last 10 years of representation of women. Then they used to be just scantily clad, waving flags while men were driving around a sports track. Then they were ads where woman's in a car, and then you've got ads where women are behind the wheel, but the implication is that they actually didn't buy the car with their own money. So slowly and surely, only in the last 2 or 3 years, you actually get the impression that she bought the car with her own money. And so that, for me, just a representation has taken so long to evolve. And for me, one of the shocking conversations I have with a lot of women is just ask about their experience of buying a car in a car dealership, and the horror stories you'll hear about how people are being treated is awful. So the lack of empathy, the lack of decision-making authority, and the lack of cultural connection for me are really, really driving a lot of this, and the industry is so slow in changing. I'm just going back to some research I was doing. I think CVS, they talked about a couple of years ago, I think they had some work to do to remove airbrushing and to have beauty standards where they're going to represent, and they're going to stop airbrushing, and they're just going to represent people as real. And so only in the last 2 years have brands and companies said, oh, we're going to actually show what it really looks like versus what it is. And consumers have always been saying, well, that's not real, that's fake. So I think, in the article, as you read about some of the brands which are making it, moving the conversation forward, it tends to be brands which are marketing and selling products designed for women, talking to women in their voice. So you can't expect, I think, the men to take the lead in this. So brands like, I think, Tenor, I know that there's this Girl Can Sport England campaign where they're just showing a representation of young girls and women in sporting contexts which aren't the size 0 and other sizes. And I think in the article it talks about Freedom Mom and Girlfriend Collective, and I was poking around their site, and they go from sizes extra small to 6L, and you're seeing people of those sizes on the website, which would never happen before.
Yeah.
And I'll just end on this point, because my wife and I, we had a women's apparel retail store, and it was called Boutique LaRue, and it fascinated me because it was targeting women size 12 to 24. And as you started to research that area, you realize that the average size in the US for women is size 16. And I learned that women, there isn't a single size, there's a range that women have. So again, I don't want to be mansplaining on this podcast, but the reality is not being portrayed in marketing and marketing messaging, and only slowly are we making baby steps to actually show reality. And I'm optimistic we'll get better, but we're nowhere near there. And there's a huge amount of work to be done if the consumer, the person who's spending most of the money, tends to be women. And so if they are in the decision-making roles of creating the content, approving the content, and producing it, then I think we'll be in a much better place in terms of addressing sexism.
Yeah, let me go through a couple of these statistics that are kind of eye-opening. One is that 1 in 10 ads show a woman at all. So that's only 1 in 10 are showing women at all. And out of those ads, 85% of the ads show women who are young, slim, and white. I mean, it's just like, that's just dismal considering how far we're supposed to have come by now. We're not getting anywhere, it seems like. And I think the most damning statistic, and I'd love to hear your commentary on this because we've been kind of skirting around the subtleness of the sexism that's going on. We've largely stopped criticizing women's bodies in advertisement, but now we're criticizing their toughness and grit. It's almost like, Mary, we've gotten away from being, directly sexist, and we've gone to this kind of tacit sexism where we're showing some slim, young, white individual being told she's not strong enough. She needs to be tougher for this world. It doesn't seem to be as empowering as it should be, does it?
I would say no. I think it's a few different things. Like mentioned earlier, I think it's that whoever is approving these ads doesn't have the right perspective on who women are. And women are individuals. They're not meant to be, everybody is different. And I think that a lot of these ads are trying to play to the middle. They're looking at their audience as, 25 to 54-year-old women, educated, and so they're trying to set a profile up of who a woman is. And that's not your, everyday woman, and it should be diverse, not just young, slim, white women. It should be, a better representation of who women really are. And I would say the other thing is that, women get a bad rap no matter what. But the thing is, if women are strong and they have a strong mind and they speak out, look what happened with the Tokyo Olympics. Women were going to talk too much, so they shouldn't be included. I mean, I think it's, bigger than just what's portrayed in advertising.
We have a simple test here, Matt, for trying to evaluate whether or not an ad is sexist or not. It's the Bechdel test. I mean, it's a very simple test. Is the scenario between two women, are they talking to each other and not talking about men? It's a very simple test to see whether or not you're actually empowering a woman to be a decision maker in the content or the advertisement that you're producing. If we have this simple test that can show us whether or not we're doing it right and we still ignore it, what do we do? I mean, how do we affect things if we can't even use a simple test like this to judge whether or not our ad is sexist or not?
Well, you have to want to, you have to want to do it. You have to be incentivized to do it. You have to have the wake-up call that this matters, that you are creating culture, not just selling a product. And the lazy shortcut for the quick joke to a Karen or to a caricature isn't interesting, and you'd be better off getting more nuanced and more interesting. And I see a lot of boards, right? A lot of boards reviewing advertising now because they've decided finally to pay attention to this, and that they care about the image of the company out there because they've learned in the market that this matters. So I think when, and it's also the creators, right? When you start to shift and you have more creative people that are the audience, that come from the audience that they're targeting, you'll also probably see a lot more progress on it. But everyone can use the wake-up call. It's really whether they want to invest in it, whether they see it as a bad thing or as a good thing. Most of us think it's a really good thing, like to do more interesting, more effective, more nuanced work, rather than just work off the tropes and the shortcuts of the past.
But I was just going to jump in. I'm channeling Cindy Gallop here, and she would just say, and she would, I think, continue to say, advertising is white guys talking to white guys about other white guys, and how much of that has changed. So just the data is there, the consumer, all the data we need is out there, but the decision makers of commissioning the work and the decision makers of creating the work hasn't become more diverse and more inclusive. So the stories about, as we look at the data of who's in the ad, who gets to talk, who has a speaking part, and what are they speaking about, and it's just so revealing that the year on year there is a glass ceiling, like that this has hit and even declined. So that we're not making progress, we're not getting better. And I look at the agencies and the holding companies and the people who spend all the money, and people who produce a lot of again, we're talking a lot about advertising here. That hasn't changed in the last few years. The only hope is you're seeing some of the DTC companies and some of the other channels breaking that mold. And so if we're only focusing on TV, I think it's going to take us forever to get there. But if we're looking at other channels, other vehicles, other mediums, I'm much more optimistic because they're bypassing the status quo. They're finding their audiences and the consumers are spending more time and money with them. So I'm optimistic that we're not, advertising is not going to lead the way, even though it should.
Let me ask you this one last question for the panel. Where is the bottleneck here? Is this an agency problem? Is this a brand problem? Is it a combination of the two? Are they in total cahoots with each other? I mean, where are we breaking down in the process where we're not effectively reaching into our creative archives or creative faculties and coming up with something that is just plain acceptable to the audience out there that's buying. I mean, it doesn't. It seems like it should be such a simple problem to fix, but it's not. And I just don't understand where the bottleneck is. I mean, George,
I really think, and it's picking up, I think, a little bit on what everybody's saying. For me, and maybe I have a different level of cynicism, I'm going to pick on a particular spot for Buick, where a very attractive woman starts talking to her Buick, and she says, "Buick GLX, help me pick up salmon." And she's making dinner, and oops, it's kids who are coming over for dinner. It's not an issue of women, to my mind, or women's roles, or pretty women, or heavy women, or black women, or white women, or men. It's an issue of we treat people like they're morons. We treat people like they're idiots. There's nobody in the entire world who says, "Wow, what a nice looking Buick," except in this commercial. And I think the estrangement is one from reality. And maybe that's the issue. It's a hell of a lot easier to do something that focus groups well, and gee whiz, we have to say the product name 4 times or we're not going to get a score, then we hate women or anything else. I think we hate people. I always go back to the Ogilvyism, which was gendered, but the consumer is not a moron, she's your wife. But I think we treat everyone like morons now. I mean, think of all the people you see in commercials who break into dance.
Well, they're usually black as well. That's the other thing.
I don't know that I agree with that. But
dancing in an ad. But I was going to chip in by saying, when I'm looking at some of the brands who are role modeling the right way or the better behaviors, right, and you're looking at a Girlfriend Collective, you go to their website, they sell sizes, extra small to 6XL, and you see those people on the front page of the website modeling the product. So larger women can wear leggings, and they do in reality. So they're going to try and sell them to you. So I think for me, the upside, I'm optimistic because the brands who get it today are breaking the norm simply by showing real people, simply by playing back reality as it is, with empathy, with compassion, and or with truth, right? As George said earlier. So I'm optimistic that women talking to other women, it's hopefully role modeling how men should start to step up and actually think about how they communicate to each other and not play off the cliches and stereotypes of, the bumbling fool dad or the guy's only interested in beer and shaving. And so I see the role modeling, but it's not the mainstream and it's not the masses, and they don't have the ad spends to run during the Grammys and the Oscars and all these big events. But I think a lot of these direct-to-consumer brands, a lot of these disruptive brands are doing it the right way. So I see the proof that it's changing. It's just we can't look to the mainstream. So if we're having these big conferences and these big keynote speakers, let's not pick the usual big brand suspects. Let's actually pick some of these other brands who are doing it right to kind of role model and show us what's going on, versus the portrayal of this fakeness that continues to win awards and continues to hog the main stage keynote speeches of just about every flagship conference out there.
And I don't disagree with you, George, about advertising being stupid. I think that not all advertising, but most advertising is plain stupid. It treats the consumer as if they're stupid.
I know I shouldn't say moron. I was quoting David, though.
Yeah, no, I understand, but it's just like I completely get that scenario, but it doesn't mean that. But I mean, stupid ads can be not sexist. I mean, you can do a stupid ad and not be sexist. I think that's the bigger issue.
I don't know. I think if you have someone doing something that's innately stupid, it's humanist. Then it's anti-human, because I'm not sure people really do these things. So I don't know if I'm forced to act stupid. I feel demeaned as a human. If I were an actor and I was forced to do something inane, get really happy about my cheese out of a can or whatever it is. I think, be gushing with happiness that I got the last beer. I think I would feel degraded whether I was a white male, which I was last time I checked, or a white female or a person of color. I think and that's kind of what I mean. I think we've lost the essential human truths of advertising. If you go back to Bernbach and say that the best advertising is based on a simple, timeless human truth, that's what I'm not seeing in advertising. And yes, it crosses gender,
I get that. I think
crosses race, it crosses everything though.
I agree. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, I think that and I can see your point. Advertising is stupid. It treats the consumer as if they're stupid, and it leads to stupid choices like sexist choices. I mean,
I think it's more than stupid. I think, if you think about any category, we are not really depicting the reality of that category. So a moment ago, I mentioned Buick. If you think about an airline commercial, there's no the pain of travel. Everyone is happy. Everyone is friendly. Everyone has room to lie back in their airline seat. It is not like that. Not that I've traveled in a year, but you know what I mean.
No, I get you.
Or a rental car counter or a fast food restaurant. We don't show reality as it is. Now, I know we've always heightened reality, improved upon reality, but I don't think we're dealing with the issues that people are dealing with in advertising. I don't think we have, years and years and years ago, there was a Volvo ad, and Volvos lasted at the time, an average of 11 years, where a Detroit car would last about 4. And the headline on the ad was, "It will last longer than the payment book." You don't ever hear thoughts about people buying cars on time anymore. We've erased the whole financial gloom from advertising's reality. And I think that, to me, is the more palpable issue. We don't really relate. We might relate to a small core of people along the East Coast or the West Coast, Chicago, maybe the rich part of Texas. But we're not really talking to most of the people in the United States who are really suffering. And I guess I'm feeling, and I'm not dismissing any issues of racism or sexism or ageism, but I am saying there's real problems that we're overlooking as an industry that might be more important or as important.
Yeah, I can see that, and I would agree with you on the sense that just this foolishness and not respecting the consumer leads to the bad decisions, and I think that the bad decisions just multiply upon themselves. But the bad decisions themselves are still bad decisions, and we need to do something to take care of those things.
But didn't Rosser Reeves write Reality in Advertising 70 years ago? I mean, I'd rather go back to that, to tell you the truth.
Well, I got to move on. I got to go to the next topic because we've exhausted our time on the first one.
This horse.
What's this?
We flogged that horse.
Yes, we only began to flog the horse.
I can't say anything anymore. I'm not a horse flogger.
Well, shoppable television, or T-commerce, has been a hotly pursued goal for a decade or longer. I mean, we've always wanted to turn TV shows into commerce engines. But according to experts in the space, the seemingly insurmountable problem was always fulfillment. TV networks could effectively sell products on shows, but could never handle the scaling of the back end to support it. Then came Amazon with a pre-built back-end infrastructure and growing streaming network and shows like Making the Cut, and they have been achieving phenomenal results, something that people have struggled to achieve for years and years and years. My question, Matt, is, does it take an Amazon-like business to be successful here, or is Amazon's success replicable for any TV network or streamer at this point? I mean, we've moved to a distributed economy. We've moved to a thing where, we see it and we can buy it because of digitization of the entire process. Is it possible that this is the time where it can happen for any brand?
Yeah, it's funny, right? Because I think a lot of us have been talking about, content and commerce in some fashion or another. I don't know. I've been present like since 1998. Like, we've all been waiting. Like, this is going to happen, right? You're going to be able to buy stuff directly from your TV, from inside the show. And then later there was Pinterest, and it actually worked, but it was like small scale. So I think we've all been waiting this for a long time. Right behind it, right, is AR and VR and everything else. What I think is different here, and why I think this is not a mirage this time, and it may be really real, and it's because of Amazon's unique position is that everything that used to be in the way is really not. I mean, I think of 4 different things. The data, it's not just knowing the geography of somebody, but you can know what people are searching for. You can know all the behavioral stuff. So that's kind of solved a little bit. The fulfillment's always been a big problem. That's been a big issue. Like, how does a cable company fulfill something you want to buy? And Amazon knows that better than anyone else, right? The third that's not talked about a lot is the user experience. I mean, there's nothing worse than the remote of a TV. So of course it never took off. You could buying within the television because the remote is so horrible. But Amazon isn't as bad as that. And you can even use voice, right? You can use Alexa to be able to do it. And the last would be really just the moment we're in. There's been a whole tipping point. Everything digital is accelerating. So all this content and commerce there's a tipping point now, and the momentum is there. So those other things combined, I think, really make this quite real. And Amazon's just uniquely positioned, but many others are as well, to benefit from it. And so are we.
Sam, I'd love you to weigh in on this as well, because this is a really kind of a turning point. It's a linchpin moment. I mean, this is the opportunity to do what marketers have always wanted to do, which is if we can feature a dress, or we can feature a computer, or we can feature a coffee maker in the middle of a program, and then you can buy it instantly, and we can fulfill it within a day or two. I mean, that's the kind of marketing that people would love to be involved with, especially in any kind of CPG or hard goods type manufacturer capacity. I mean, this is the moment. What do we need to do next? How do we evolve this moment into reality across the spectrum, not just in Amazon's camp, but elsewhere throughout the industry?
Well, as I was researching this, Amazon is just so well entrenched and commerce ready. So do any of the other players actually really have any of the competence, right? So the Amazon, looking at, I think there's some article you shared with us, Amazon they have the ecosystem. They've got the Prime subscription. They've got the Alexa and connected devices. They've got IMDb, and they've got the Amazon website. And I'm just thinking, yeah, that's me. So I'm always on Amazon. I don't know how much money they make out of me. I don't want to know how much money they make out of me. I've got the Alexa now wanting to have a conversation with me. So after I ask Alexa the weather, Alexa's trying to extend it to like a 3-minute conversation. And I was watching Coming to America 2 the other day, and I'm thinking Alexa can probably hear that I'm watching this movie, and I think there was Pepsi integration. So I was surprised that there weren't opportunities of people trying to sell me stuff, because it's all connected in. So I think Amazon are I think are best placed, because they got all my data. They're in all my rooms. they know, they've got my credit card. They know what I'm buying. I don't know anyone else who could be as ubiquitous and as essential and as frictionless, right? So for me, I don't know who can compete other than. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but as I was looking at the QVC, the Curate brands, so they have QVC, HSN, and Zilly. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but their sales were up 5% last year. So I think people are watching these shopping networks and buying in the traditional, those traditional sort of shopping TV channels, and just buying stuff in that way. So maybe it's overcomplicating it by having this super integrated system with the back end fulfillment through Amazon, because HSN and QVC are doing quite well on their own. But if I take a step back from all of my Tom,
well, let me caveat that. I mean, the Home Shopping Network and QVC and the shopping channels have similar problems. Because that you can easily buy stuff and they can fulfill it to you, but you can't really return it very easily. And it's just like they haven't thought through the entire fulfillment process. They've only thought through the get it to your doorstep process. And that's part of it. I mean, the customer service angle and the quality of the products.
Well, I mean, that's where Amazon wins, right? And Zappos, the Zappos experience is probably still number one, where they give you a year to send stuff back, and they make it idiot-proof to do. So, and that's part of the Amazon sort of family. So maybe Zappos is even the model where you could order with impunity and know that you've got a year to send stuff back, and you don't have. It's not hard to return stuff. And so to answer your question, why brands and marketers, I just don't think they as I say, I watch Coming to America too, and I'm seeing how their content, their movies, their TV shows are more engaging. They're more events. There was a huge social component, and I was surprised that the commercial aspect wasn't turned on for that. But I can only envisage it coming. I think Amazon are looking for more ways to get revenue. I can't see who can compete with them, and who will compete with them successfully. And also, from a personal perspective, I think I'm ready for them to take my money. I'm ready for Alexa to say, "Hey Sam, you need a better, a new Wi-Fi router," and sort of sell that to me based on what I'm doing and what I'm using. So I think they have permission, certainly my permission, if you're listening, Jeff, to do a bit more and go a bit further. Jeff Bezos, that is, because I especially with Amazon Prime, the amount of time and the content. I think there's a lot of great content on there as well. So I can only see them really elevating this going forward. So we perhaps need to look forward to see what comes next versus expecting it to have already been done.
I think we need to have Mary weigh in here at this point, because Mary is the only one of us who actually works for a brand and is actually potentially a customer of something like this. I mean, is the opportunity still as great as the experts claim? Do you see this as an opportunity for your company to potentially bring products to television programs or other types of media and potentially turn it into a commerce engine where you're selling directly?
It's interesting because in the late summer, I had this exact conversation with my TV media buying agency that I wanted to do shopping right out of the commercial. And they basically told me that it's not proven to be successful at all. They said they haven't had any client that's actually been successful at it. And, the other thing is that, consumers, when they're watching TV, are often on a second device. So I think that, the opportunity might actually be the second device selling, because if when you read up on this, when they're watching a specific show that they don't want interrupted, they don't want to be doing that when they're watching the show, but they'll do it on another device. So I think that, maybe it would be better to look at some type of attribution model instead of, just shopping out of the show. Is it a technique that I'd like to use as a marketer? Absolutely. I think that, like you said, Amazon obviously has a leg up. They're the benchmark as far as fulfillment. But there have been other things that I've seen recently on morning shows where you can use a QR code to go to a site to buy something, but it's also fulfilled by another company. I definitely think there's opportunity here. I just think that, you really have to research consumer behavior and see if it's something that the consumer is really going to engage in, and what is that way that you're going to get them to do it. I mean, I've seen some things recently by some of the shopping networks with, social shopping, which is also, coming much more to the forefront for consumers, which also kind of is in the same ecosystem. It's just a different media channel. So, I mean, I think there's definitely, challenges, but I also think there's opportunity. But it may not. But you have to figure out which is the behavior the consumer is willing to do to pursue purchasing that item, and at what point is their interest heightened, or is it, at what point are they going to, pull the trigger and actually buy it?
Matt, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think there's just a lot of downside too, right? You risk being wrong, suggesting something that's way off, which really makes the brand and the platform look bad. You could do poor delivery, and then that's a bad customer experience. You could also be kind of breaking the fourth wall. A lot of us kind of tune into content not for the commerce of it, and we don't want it. We don't want it there. We want interactive, like, pop-up video on MTV because the fun facts are fun, but we don't really want to buy anything unless it's like you're watching Clueless and you want to buy Cher's closet organizer, because we all want that. So yeah, I guess I think about a lot of the downsides to it too, as well as, and maybe that's why the performance was so bad with the other clients they tried, Mary.
There's two other bits. There's a review in the journal, the Wall Street Journal today, of a book called Fulfillment: Winning and Losing in One-Click America, that is is pretty damning about the Amazonization of the country, basically building a small country of have-nots and a huge country that's basically treated like a colonial entity, where we've taken all the retail out of it and poured all the wealth into a few pockets. So I don't think it's just a question of commerce. I think we're going to have to start thinking about, the sweetheart tax deals companies like Amazon have made. That's one bit. And then number two, I remember having read something a few years ago in the New York Times, and it starts off in 1974 with a company some of you might have heard of called Sears, which built the largest office building in the world. And now 40 years later, they're out of business. And we would have all said a few years ago it was going to be Bentonville that was going to take over all commerce. So I think these empires last a while. If they're lucky, they last a long while, but they're not Rome. I mean, I grew up, I'm 63. I grew up, it was A&P on every corner, and the largest fast food chain in the country was Howard Johnson's. I'm not making this up. It's all true. I'm only 63. So I think it's fantastic, if we ever can buy on a click, but I do think like the one-clickization is leading to a lot of income disparity and a lot of waste and things like that. I don't think I think it's great for the sellers. I'm not so sure it's great for the rest of us. And
it's important to recognize that one of the biggest successes that Amazon has experienced was with Making the Cut, which had no one-click advertising. I mean, there was no click on this dress in the middle of the show and buy the dress. They just said you can go to the website and you can shop the dress styles right now, and they had phenomenal success. Obviously they had the brand, the star power of Heidi Klum and Tim Gunn being on the program, making these recommendations, but it's essentially was a commercial that led you to the website for the fulfillment. And it seems like we're so caught up in this one-click type experience where we use our remote and we click on the item and we buy it now, or we use a QR code that shows up in the middle of the advertisement or the middle of the show and allows you to buy it that way. I mean, they didn't need to do any of that, and they were still successful. And I think that's the big lesson to be taken away from this. Well, I want to move on to another topic because we are running out of time. I mean, in a seeming fit of wokeism, Unilever has banned the use of the word normal in their marketing communications. George, is this an important moment in advertising history or an overreaction of epic proportions? What's your take on banning normal as a word?
It's probably both. I know we can't really, any more than we can have crayons that have flesh colors. We can't say normal anymore because it brings in a lot of cultural biases. And we, as I think Mary said about half an hour ago, everyone is different. So there is no normal. There are norms, but there's no normal. And I'm all for that. I do think, we run the risk as a society of being incredibly atomized. And we're already seeing this kind of dissolution or the disintegration of social glue, which is a problem, I think, as a culture, that we don't have necessarily shared interests and maybe even values in some cases. But I'm fine to see normal go. As someone who's never been considered normal, I'm fine to let it go.
Yeah, I'm kind of I'm very skeptical of woke overreactions to words, but I'm okay with normal going away too, Sam. I'd love to get your thoughts on this because you know me. It's just like I am missing a few fingers, so I'm not normal. I wear glasses, I'm not normal. I have Parkinson's, I'm not normal. It's just like, putting that mean standard on everything seems to be a potential problem for brands as people wake up to the fact that they don't have to maintain some kind of quote unquote normal stance on anything anymore, that they can be an individual and that they don't need to conform themselves to societal standards. I mean, this seems like it's overall a good move on their part, and probably something that a lot of brands should emulate, shouldn't they?
Well, I talked earlier about a couple of years ago, brands looking to stop using Photoshop and airbrushing, and this is really about brands communicating in a empathetic and I think a compassionate and real way. And so, but again, the reason I talk about some of the other things is that alongside this change, they're also going to stop digital alterations. So Unilever are going to stop digital alterations of body shapes and skin color of the models when used in advertising. So it's more than just the words, it's actually the behaviors. And a couple of years ago, I think last year, they changed a brand called Fair and Lovely to Glow and Lovely because of the stereotyping of darker skin tones. So the words matter, and behind the words are beliefs, values, behaviors, biases, and how the world works. So I am optimistic, again, that this is not a superficial thing. And you've got brands, especially in Unilever, right? They've been pushing for this purpose-driven approach, and they're trying to move beyond just the environmental, take out the cardboard and use less water stuff, and stand for something that actually resonates in people's lives and for their consumer, for their communities and the world at large. And brands like Dove have been doing it, and Lifebuoy, which is a soap brand which has been about saving lives. Well, obviously now in COVID it's becoming more important. Axe moved from spray more, get more, sort of teens just trying to get with girls, and actually finding your magic as the positioning. So I think they've been on this path for shifting their brands. Removing normal makes sense, and I'll link that back to just reality. So it was, I think, was it December 2020 that UPS allowed its employees to, UPS, the delivery company, transportation company, they allowed their employees to wear beards, longer hair, and natural black hairstyles like afros and braids and locks. So what was normal for them excluded beards and natural black hairstyles and twists and knots. So. And then in 2019, there was this Crown Act that was introduced to protect respectful and open workplace for natural hairstyles, again, disproportionately affecting the African American and Black community. So it's getting beyond just the word normal, but actually seeing what's going on in culture and society and reflecting that, so that you can treat people, or at least reach more people. Because as you said, Bob, we're all different. When there's normal implies that everything else is abnormal, because that's just basic language we've created. And so to move beyond that, I don't think is woke washing or woke splaining. I believe it's actually being more real. And so for me, I'm excited because actually, normal, if we all don't believe we're normal, we don't all fit into that box, then help me see more of myself, appeal to more of what I truly believe, talk to me in realer ways that I can really connect with. I think that is what I see coming out of this. And as I say, I gave a couple of examples of the real harm or the real biases that were underpinning normal. And I can only see this as an upside. So kudos to Unilever, and hopefully more brands follow.
Yeah, here, listening to you talk about this, it becomes really obvious to me that this normal thing is not the issue. I mean, the word normal has lots of connotations that are problematic, but there are also connotations that are not problematic. I mean, by saying that you're normal means that you're not being foolish, in some senses. It's just like there are possible uses of the word normal that work. But the bigger story here is the actions that are going behind the word and behind the action of removing normal from the vocabulary of the brand. It's more about the actions behind it. I like that. It makes a lot of sense to me. Well, I want to get to this final topic real fast. Twitter's Clubhouse clone Spaces may soon get a tip jar for event organizers to use. Sam, is this an effective monetization tool or a placeholder appeasement for people getting involved with spaces and hosting rooms? I mean, what do you think?
Well, I've just been on my soapbox, Bob, so I'll try and keep this brief. But anyway, get comfortable, everybody, as I start to pontificate. I've heard the Clubhouse is grumbling, right, that they've been spitting wisdom for the last 10 minutes and not getting paid for it. So, because Clubhouses, as in Clubhouse participants. So I actually see this tip jar as a reasonable way of compensating people and monetizing the platform. And I think if we're talking about Twitter Spaces, that April 2021 is when they're thinking of rolling it out. And this is going to have to happen in some way, because they're tweaking lots of things. They're going to make it downloadable and transcripts. So the content is not going to be as ephemeral as other platforms, and therefore there's real value being delivered. And I'm projecting that, hey, these are like this is essentially you're creating a conference or an event, and you're bringing value to it. And so how do you compensate some people who are the experts, the speakers, the panelists in some way? You know, if you're a real speaker, if you're a speaker in another conferences, you get an honorarium or a payment. So I can see that monetizing it and allowing people to be compensated makes sense. And as we, you know, we're sat here in 2021, but if we go down the path, this is going to be event type situation. There's going to be brands playing, there's going to be private rooms. So all of this is going to be monetized in some way. My bigger concern is not the monetization. It's more about controlling the platforms, right? And preventing scams and trolling and abuse and all the brands, all the sort of the dark sides of overall abuse and safety on those platforms, and you know, people being scammed out of money, right? So that's where I'm more concerned. But in terms of using it in this way to compensate people, it makes sense, especially as a lot of the people speaking aren't the big names and heavy hitters. I think this is actually quite an egalitarian and quite a good way to bring some fairness and bring some. Yeah, I think some compensation
Bob,
for the value.
I like it because it really has, you know, it reminds us that content, you know, we've learned a lot of bad lessons about content being free and experiences being free. So there's a lot of good monetization things out there. And when people don't make a lot of money doing this, they cover their costs, they make their real money public speaking or something, some other way or through their business. So I'm an advocate for that. Bob, you should consider doing a tip jar here on the show. Really more for guests than for you.
Yeah, I love that idea.
If you like something that someone said on the show, just click their tip jar and give them a little bit of money. I could do that. Before we get off this topic, Mary, I'd love your thoughts on Clubhouse as a whole and Spaces as Spaces and the other competitors coming into the space. Is this movement toward audio rooms and programming, is that interesting to you as a brand? And is there an advertising marketing potential for you as a result of these?
I mean, obviously, as a brand marketer, I'm interested in any new channel that surfaces. I think that, you know, one of the things I concern myself with all the time is making sure that it serves a purpose for the brand. And, you know, like, for instance, like, I'll give you an example, like everybody wants to be on TikTok, but, you know, if it doesn't make sense for your brand and your brand message and your consumer, then, you know, we shouldn't be there. So, you know, that's my approach for all of those things. I'm not the type of marketer that just goes after whatever the newest thing is. If it doesn't serve a purpose, it doesn't deliver a service to our customer, then it has no place in our mix, basically.
Hear, hear. I was the one asking, why do you want a website back in the day? Yeah, it's just like, if you could answer that question, totally happy to get you a website. But it's just like, until you can answer that question, I teach my students that. Ask the question why. Always ask the question why. Well, it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. Before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with Samuel Mani. You can find him at CIsquared.net. That's where he is a managing partner of the marketing practice. So tell us, what's going on in your world, Sam? What would you like to promote?
Well, I'd like to promote the work we're doing. You know, in this world that we live in right now, there's a lot of misunderstanding, miscommunication, and disagreements going on, and we call them silent productivity killers. And so a lot of the work we do is really helping people with an advanced communication framework, and we just kind of develop communication skills. We call it Storytelling Plus. And so that's what I'm really passionate about right now. And if the marketers listening to this show, we've talked a bit about storytelling and brand positioning and how you can compete versus challenger brands, or misunderstanding customer and consumer needs and developing new products or not. And I think a big one that we see and we can help with is sales teams won't use most materials that marketers provide. I think the number's like 80% of what marketing provides sales goes in the garbage or bin for those in the UK. So we can help you with those types of things by really getting to the root cause and helping to resolve that. So that's what I do at CI Squared. And season 5 of Across the Pond Marketing Transformed is going to come out soon. We said spring, so late spring it's coming out. So I'm really excited about that. Me and my buddy Chris Lawson, season 5 of Across the Pond Marketing Transformed podcast is coming soon. We've got some great interviews with some awesome people. So I'm excited about that as well.
Oh, fantastic. And for those of you out there, if you haven't had a chance to ever interact with Sam, you should do so. You should work with him. You should find out more about him. You should hang out with him. You should drink beer with him. He's an awesome dude. So let's
Thanks,
get
Bud. I'm getting emotional about it.
Next up, we have Mary Rogers. You can find her at Cuisinart.com. That's the company where she is you're essentially the marketing director of the operation, right?
Yes, I am basically the queen of brand marketing for the company. I've been there for 25 years. This is my 25th year.
Wow,
so
I had no idea you were there that long. That's fantastic.
And as you can imagine, things have changed in the marketing world dramatically during that time period. I spend a lot of my time not just on marketing, but a lot of other aspects of our business. And I would say, check out our website, www.cuisinart.com, and follow us on social media. We have lots of great innovative products coming out this year, and we're here to serve our customer.
I love Cuisinart products. I have several of them right in my kitchen. So very, very excited to have you on the program. Not just because you're at Cuisinart, because you're also a very smart person. So enjoy that.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, next up, George Tannenbaum. You can find him at georgetannenbaum.com. That's the place where you can connect with his agency and work with him to develop your brand campaign. What I love about your website and your content, George, is you're really focused on effectiveness, and that's just near and dear to my heart. So tell us what's going on in your world. What would you like to promote?
Well, I think the first step of effectiveness, and maybe I'm just 70% more, maybe that should be my tagline, 70% more cynical than normal people. But what I found, a lot of clients, a lot of brands don't really know what they're in business to do, to sell, what makes them different. And basically that's, in this stage of my life, that's what I'm doing. And I'm trying to kind of find positioning differences, strategic differences, language differences, so a company can go to market and punch above their weight, because no one, from the largest clients to the smallest, has enough money to do everything they want to do. So that's what I'm doing, slightly more than full time now, and having a good time doing it.
No, that sounds fantastic.
So don't call me because I'm way too busy.
That's a terrible thing to say when you're trying to market yourself.
What an advertising tagline. That's scary.
Reverse psychology.
I'm so busy. It's like, we got to call him down, you great advertising marketer.
I'm way too busy. It's crazy.
Okay, that's fantastic. Well, last but not least, Matt Zucker. You can find him at profit.com. That's where he is a partner and leads up their sales and marketing, or marketing and sales operation. He's you're a co-lead on that particular end of the business. So I don't know what that means, but I know you do a lot of work and you travel the globe when we're not in pandemic. So tell us what's going on in your world, Matt. What would you like to promote?
Co-lead means you do half the work, so that's that's kind of the clincher of it too. But thanks. Until my tip jar is operational, Bob, I'll continue to plug my book, Bronze Seek Silver, because it's funny, because a lot of the topics we cover, because it traces like early digital marketing, especially in New York and at Ogilvy Interactive, where George and I worked, all the way up through my shift into management consulting. A lot of the topics we talk about, like on the show tonight, kind of come up in different early ways, by somebody, or maybe I was tangentially involved in, or other people were. So like the stuff that hits the news now was sometimes hitting the news earlier, but maybe in different ways, and it wasn't ready for prime time.
That's very insightful, and definitely the kind of thing that we would look to you for because of your background. So that's fantastic. As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. And of course, you can find out how to advertise on this program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it is time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, the Ikea podcast catalog. George, have you seen this? I mean, they killed they killed their catalog, which was iconic, and they produced a 4-hour podcast which basically describes the products. I don't know of anybody who will actually listen to this, but man, it's brilliant creative in the sense that it gets attention for them. A lot of people are paying attention to this right now.
It gets attention in our industry. I mean, seriously, it's a stunt. I'm sorry. It's a words-based stunt. I know the people who did it. I have nothing against them. I can't see it bringing a dime into a store. I'm sorry. It's a stunt.
Yeah, it probably is, but it's an interesting stunt to me.
Well, I was listening to it, and I'd give a shout out to Jasmine Richardson, who's the voiceover talent. I was listening to thinking, actually, it's in the background, and I'm working away. I'm thinking, I'm not going on your website, but you're making me want that item. So it was kind of really an interesting creative solve. So I'm just jumping ahead thinking, hey, if you're a B2B, I think there's B2B brands who could really have a field day with this if they really understand their customer and their audience, especially if you're B2B, you're serving certain audiences with radio and audio on in the background. I think this could be a win. And also there's just another play in terms of inclusiveness and accessibility for people with visual disability. So there are some other wins here. And I applaud IKEA and the creative team for coming up with something. And I'm listening to it thinking, damn, I'm actually enjoying this. So maybe it's not just for the elite industry people, and it's actually for the masses as well.
For me, I felt like it just highlighted the other action. It wasn't that this was trying to drive sales, but it was trying to highlight the fact of where's my catalog? Your catalog is no longer. And I thought that was a kind of a clever way to do that. Well, the fail for this week, which I'm going to give to LG, and I don't know about you, Mary, but when I search for a TV, I look for a great screen. I look for good low motion blur. I look for all these things. Now suddenly I have to look for making sure that my TV is not going to serve up advertisements in the menu. I mean, and they're talking about this article I was reading was saying that LG had expanded their ad program to the top tier TVs. So we're talking about people spending $3,000 on a TV are getting ads in their menu now. I mean, that just seems like an egregious kind of step over boundaries when you're talking about, a TV. I mean, it just, I can see that in the lower cost TVs, advertising supports you. It takes a little of the cost off the television. I can understand that. But when you're paying top dollar for a TV, this seems like a real mistake on their part.
I was so hoping you'd let me talk about Burger King, but I guess I won't be able to. So, I mean, I think on the consumer front, and I agree. When you're shopping for a TV, anytime I've had to buy a TV, it takes a lot of research, and it's also one of the few items I still want to see in person, like a car, basically. But I think it's intrusive. I think that, I hope they have some good privacy settings in there, because I would guarantee a lot of people would be shutting that down if they could. I think that especially in those price ranges, they must be making their highest margin profit on those upper end TVs. So I don't understand why they would also then need to be selling advertising.
I will say we ran a campaign for a financial services brand recently, and I was surprised that one of the better networks for results was our ad run on Samsung. Sort of the same thing, but was it? I was surprised people were clicking on it, but they were. I don't know if they were mad, but they were.
Well, I can't say that the ads are not working, that's for sure. But I would think that on the higher end TVs, they shouldn't be doing that. Well, and to lay your concerns to rest, Mary, I absolutely expect everybody to talk about this last subject. I have rarely seen a more mediocre advertising campaign generate this level of angst for both the brand and the community at large. It is just crazy. This ad, I mean, it was basically Burger King went out with an advertisement, a full-page advertisement that said, "Women belong in the kitchen." And it was meant to talk about the fact that advertising that basically women should be in positions of power in restaurant kitchens. They should be chefs. They should be executive chefs. They should be restaurateurs, that they need to be empowered in that community. And it was a positive campaign, but it was a mediocre creative execution that was made worse when BK UK, or Burger King UK, tweeted out the headline without any of the supporting details behind it, which caused this huge uproar. So you guys take it away. I mean, it's just like, what is the deal here? Do we blame Burger King for this? Because it's just a mediocre ad, and you would think that in a polite society we could say this ad sucked, it miscommunicated, get over it. But instead, we're all out to cancel Burger King over it. And I'm wondering, is that fair or not? Mary, you take it away.
So I would say this kind of ties back to the beginning of the program when we were talking about, portraying women in advertising. I mean, I think they thought they were being cute, because they were saying, women, elevate women in the kitchen, right? Because it was basically a scholarship program. But my problem with it is they should have been elevating women into other positions, not in the kitchen. And right now, if you look at the restaurant industry across the globe, I think this is an area that people would really think twice about re-entering, because it was decimated during the pandemic. I mean, and the other thing about it too is we all know that restaurant jobs are not high-paying jobs. They're very hard work. They are, you're on your feet all day. You're working like a dog, and you're not exactly making a ton of money. And then if you also look at the level of scholarship, it wasn't that great in the end of the day. The other thing that bothered me about it is I noticed that the CMO was, commenting back to comments on his LinkedIn page about this almost like in a defensive way, and put something on there about like, if you don't try something, you're going to fail. But I think that it was not well thought out in the end of the day.
Yeah, I'll jump in and say, I'm watching this as a guy thinking, let's not do any mansplaining right now. Let's listen and observe. And hearing Mary, thank you for sharing your perspective and listening to that, because it was off, and it was just off, and the execution was poor. And it's like, I want to honor you by making a comment that is offensive and sexist and reinforcing a stereotype. It's like, and it's the CMO, Fernando Machado. He has been out there commenting, right? So at least he wasn't hiding. Most CMOs, when things like this happen, I remember the Pepsi example and various other things, they just go silent and they just don't say anything. So he was out there owning the mistake. So first of all, I think he's on record saying, hey, this was a mistake. He was trying to justify it, but hey, we made a mistake. And also defending his agencies. So that's one piece that I thought, okay, a CMO who's actually out there owning the screw up, admitting to it, defending the agencies and saying, hey, I approved it. So if it's bad, it's my fault. But again, I just think we talked about it earlier in the show. This is why the marketing is broken. This is why advertising is broken, right? Because the decision makers ultimately aren't the audience you're trying to say, oh, but you don't like this isn't helping you. Well, guess who was in the process of deciding, creating, and approving? So I think this is a shining a spotlight on the fundamental issues that we face. And hopefully the industry will listen. And again, I'm not saying that Burger King or Phil Machado, are bad people, but the irony of trying to support women and uplift them and actually doing it wrong and badly, and the people deciding weren't the actual audience, that for me should hopefully reveal the problem so that you don't make that mistake again. And that's what I take away from it.
Yeah, for me, this was, it was just a terrible ad. Let's just get it out and say it, directly. It was just a terrible ad. It was an ill thought out campaign. They made every mistake in the book at every step of the journey. It was just awful the way it went down. But was it horribly sexist? No, it was tacitly sexist, and that's the problem. Mary says it best when I think you mentioned, it goes right back to the first topic that, it's just more examples of people doing it wrong, not necessarily active sexism, but just people being stupid, not really thinking through the problem and coming up with a solution that makes sense. Well, have a suggestion for this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag FairFailFoul. That's #FairFailFoul. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
It's like, you know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.